Hello, I'm David Harper with the BBC News. The US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says relations between the world's two largest economies are moving towards a surer footing as a result of 10 hours of bilateral meetings in Beijing. Ms. Yellen said despite disagreements between the US and China, she did not frame their relationship through conflict. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes has this assessment.
This is about as good as we can have expected from this trip. Ms. Yellen speaking very positively about meeting face-to-face with her Chinese counterparts for the first time, meeting the new team in charge in China, and that they have re-established face-to-face dialogue. That is all positive, and we've heard positive noises from the Chinese side too. But I don't think anyone should think this means that US-China relations are now back on, really positive course, because real disagreements remain between the US and China. And I don't think there's much prospect that those disagreements are going to disappear anytime soon.
The Solomon Islands Prime Minister Manasseh Sogavare has phoned to China for a visit aimed at reinforcing its ties between Beijing and the tiny Pacific nation. Mr. Sogavare recently signed a security agreement relating to China's embassy, which Western nations fear will pave the way for Beijing to establish its first permanent military base in the Pacific. A Texas businessman has mounted a legal action in an attempt to stop the state's governor from placing large floating buoys across the Rio Grande River to block migrants trying to cross into the United States. He said the buoys would obstruct the exact location where his kayaking company offers river tours. Bernadette Keogh reports.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott is mounting a multi-billion-dollar effort to block migrants from Mexico. His latest tactic is to install a line of huge spherical buoys across the river, each more than a metre wide. But local businessman Jesse Fuentes fears the floating barrier will hurt his river tours, and he accuses the governor of exceeding his powers. Governor Abbott, who regularly accuses President Biden of allowing thousands of undocumented migrants to enter the country, defiantly said in a tweet, "We'll see you in court."
Polling stations have opened for presidential elections in Uzbekistan. The outcome of the vote in the gas-rich former Soviet state is not in doubt. Here's Ben Lowings.
3 virtual unknowns are vying to unseat Uzbek President Shavkat Mirziyoyev. First elected in 2016 and all but certain to win on Sunday, he's on course to remain in power until at least 2037. Constitutional changes to extend his term of office were backed in a referendum. Mr. Mirziyoyev embodies the authoritarian character of Uzbek politics. He himself oversaw last year's much-criticised crackdown on separatist unrest in the region of Karakalpakstan. At least 21 people were killed.
World News from the BBC. North Korea has criticised the International Atomic Energy Agency's backing of Japan's plan to release treated radioactive water into the sea. The IAEA said the release of wastewater from the wrecked Fukushima nuclear plant would conform to international standards. Pyongyang says it demonstrates what it calls the double standards of the UN's nuclear watchdog. The head of the IAEA, Rafael Grossi, is in South Korea to allay fears about the discharge. The body of a Mexican journalist who'd been missing since Wednesday has been found in a rural area in the western state of Nayarit. Luis Martin Sanchez worked for the newspaper La Jornada. His body was wrapped in plastic bags with a message attached to his chest. His wife reported him missing on Friday, saying he'd been taken from home by unknown men. The United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has condemned the airstrike in Sudan, which killed 22 people in Omdurman, which lies across the River Nile opposite the capital Khartoum. For almost 3 months, the army and the rival paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, have been at war. More than 3 million people have been displaced. In recent days, the two sides have been fighting for control of the state broadcaster in Omdurman. Scientists in Britain have developed a technique to reduce methane emissions from cows by extracting a chemical from daffodils and putting it into the animal's feed. Tom Heap reports.
It's a fact of life. Cows release a fair bit of gas. The government estimates around half the UK's methane emissions comes from cows, and globally that livestock produces around 14% of greenhouse gas emissions. It's one of the reasons there have been calls from climate campaigners to reduce livestock farming. Scientists have now succeeded in extracting a chemical called hemanthamine from daffodils, and laboratory tests using an artificial cow's stomach have shown it could reduce methane by 30%.
BBC News.